as we go live. And once we've done that, then I'll put the camera back. Maybe you might even prefer to turn off your camera. Bruce, you're back. Bruce, how lovely. Nice to see you.
I am.
Are you back in the Holy Land?
Thank you.
Or we've seen you at some
Yes.
lovely. Well, welcome, and welcome to Lois and to others who've joined us since at 10:30. Just before we begin the Parsha, I want to just respond to the concept of water and Sukkot. But, you know, I listened to a lot of Divrei Torah, particularly on Friday on the radio. And one of the things that struck me this year, I learned something new when I was listening to the idea that all of Sukkot, and I'm sorry, I'm going to just take this moment to mute everybody. You know that you can unmute yourself, but I just want to share with you, I learned something beautiful about Sukkot, that all of Sukkot is actually about water. It was all about water. And that when we shake the lulav, the rustling sound that we hear is supposed to remind us of the water. And I just thought that was a beautiful idea, to shake the lulav and hear water, and how our senses are aroused by so much, but we do know the sound of water, and we listen for the sound of water, and when we hear it, we're attracted to it. And it just reminds me, you know, Simchat Beta Shoava, the concept of water, the concept that, of course, we can't survive without water. This is a huge thing for us, is this need to recognize the importance of water, which is going to come up in today's Parsha over and over again, the concept of water. And as many of you know, one of my favorite places in the world is Etche Homo, the home of the Sisters of Zion in the old city of Jerusalem. And many of you have been with me to the excavations underneath. And the excavations are clearly linked to the whole temple area. And until about 3 or 4 years ago, you used to go and see the wonderful cistern that they had there from the second temple period, a huge cistern full of water, and you could go and see it. And then about 3 years ago, maybe 4 now, one morning the sisters woke up and all the water was gone from the cistern overnight. A huge Roman cistern, and all the water disappeared. And the question was, why has the water disappeared from the cistern? And what had happened was that they had opened up in the temple tunnels the water. They just unblocked it, and all the water flowed from Etche Homo to the cistern underneath the temple. And it was beautiful on many levels, but of course the most important level was it just proved that this had been part of the water system for the second temple. And you now had proof in that the water flowed there when they opened it up. And I just think that this idea of the water being there for us, the water, we had to do something to bring it, but what a miracle that it rains. With this huge, long, hot summer, followed on one of the record years since the creation of the state of rain into the Kinneret. How amazing that one thing offsets the other. And of course, now we are saying the bracha Morit HaGeshem. We are now in the time of praying for rain, and the sense of seasons, rainy seasons and dry seasons, is also going to play into what we're going to talk about with the Parsha. So that was a little bit of a lead-in, because we pick up reading Bereishit immediately after we've had this festival of Sukkot, where we pray for rain, where we bring the sound of rain and water into our minds. And I want to start with reading the Parsha and then looking at some readings with you. And first of all, I want to welcome, I didn't have a chance to say it, there are some new participants, some returning participants, and some participants I expect to join us late or hear it on Facebook later, because none of our Australian participants are able to join us today because it's still Yom Tov for them. So they'll be picking it up later. Okay, so you all know, and I decided, as has been my habit in the last few weeks, and certainly when I was doing the Psalms, to use R.E.A. Kaplan's translation, because I find it very interesting. Sometimes it will be different from the translations, for example, for the JPS, which I also have here, or for the Art Scroll, but excuse the difference and enjoy the difference. Bereishit, in the beginning, in the beginning. Now, even saying in the beginning as the opening is controversial, because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth may not be a good translation of Bereishit, bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, because the word Bereishit, as some of you will have heard many times, is a word in what we call construct state, meaning it really means in the beginning of. And so it might be a better translation to say in the beginning of God's creation, or as some Kabbalists do, in the beginning of creation, Elokim. And Elokim becomes a sort of creation, which is highly problematic, of course, unless you are in a Kabbalistic mode of thinking, in which case you understand that the creation of God doesn't mean that God is a creation. What it means is that Elokim is a type or a part or an emanation of something which is so much bigger even than Elokim, that the God who is the creator and the God who is Elokim is only a part or an emanation of this bigger picture of what is God. It's very, very complicated, but what does it mean in the beginning, and in the beginning of what? What is a beginning? Because a beginning implies somehow an end or a break in time. And God is so much bigger than time. So even these first words are very, very difficult for us. But we're going to move forward and get to the next bit of difficulty, because it says, which is translated here, the earth was without form and empty. But it says also the word in the Hebrew, it's not in the negative, it's in the positive. And the world was tohu vavohu. What does tohu vavohu mean? We've translated it in a negative way, without form and empty. But I'm going to come back to this idea as well. And then it says there was darkness on the face of the earth. So is darkness something that exists before creation? Was that there before God says something? Is darkness a state that existed? And the first part of creation, therefore, is light, which breaks the darkness, which breaks the tohu vavohu, which means there was something there before there was creation. It's very difficult for us. We are so limited in our comprehension of these things, but we have to accept it. And then it says, Ruach Elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim, that God's presence was hovering over the water. Is the water the same as the tohu vavohu, or is the water something different from the tohu vavohu? I hope that with me you're understanding how complicated this is, and how the words of the Torah are not enlightening to us. What they are they are posing for us all sorts of questions. They're raising issues. As we read these first words, we are so tempted to begin with Vayomer Elokim vayihi or, that God said, let there be light, and there was light. Because that can make sense to us. Well, not really. God speaks and there is. The power of God's word in creation is something that, of course, has led to both literal interpretations and far less literal interpretations about the idea of the power of the word to create. But that's where we like to start. We like to start with the idea that God speaks and there is. But the first two verses or three verses or two verses have actually said to us, there was something there beforehand. There was something there before God created or God spoke. But we don't know what, and we don't understand what that was. Anyway, God created light, so there was light divided between the light and the darkness, named the light day and the darkness he named night. It was evening and it was morning, day one. Of course, I don't need to remind you about the implication of the fact that a day begins the night before, which is very important for us, that a day begins the night before. That was day one. And notice it says Yom Echad. It doesn't say Yom HaRishon. It says day one. We don't know how long a day was. We don't know what this process really, how long this process took when we moved from the state of being tohu vavohu with God hovering over water to a point where there is light and therefore there is day. And again, the idea that through this, time is created. What do we mean by time? There is now some sort of rhythm or change of state. One of the most important theological positions in Judaism, and by the way, not only in Judaism, but an important position in many of the religions, is that God is timeless, and of course without shape or form, but timeless and immutable. And what changes is everything around God. Now, this concept of God's immutability is a concept that the philosophers, Jewish philosophers and other philosophers, discuss at enormous lengths. We had a discussion in Praying Together in Jerusalem last Thursday, in which one of our Sikh scholars participated and said that when the Sikhs pray, they're actually praying for God to change. Now, for many of us in other traditions, this was an extremely shocking, surprising, amazing concept that we should pray for God to change, because that's not our position. We say that God is the only immutable thing and that everything else can change, but not God. So that's very interesting. Anyway, let's move quickly through because I want to move to day two. God said there shall be, this is Aria Kaplan's beautiful translation, there shall be a sky in the middle of the water, and it shall divide between water and water. God thus made the sky, and it separated the water from below the sky from the water of above the sky, and it remained that way. And God named the sky heaven. It was evening and morning, a second day. This idea of the sky, what we see as the top of the world or the universe, being the break between Shamayim, heaven, and the Mayim below. But notice at this point, everything is still water. And Rabbi Per made a point in Sukkot when he was speaking about the idea that it's interesting that when you look at clouds, they have the nature of being both nothingness and everythingness at once. You can't hold or grasp a cloud, but the cloud actually contains in it the most material of material things, water. A cloud is actually the source of that which is substantial at the same time as being insubstantial in itself, which is just a beautiful idea, again, of what period we are in. Having moved from Sukkot to Bereishit, we are moving from all these concepts of nothingness or pure spirituality and the combination between spirituality and physicality. And we start our year reading Bereishit, which deals with the description of the creation of physicality out of spirituality. So that's That's there. I need to move to day 3. God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered to one place, and the land, the dry land, shall be seen. Now, in Aryeh Kaplan's translation, shall be seen, mimakom echad, v'tera'eh et hayabasha vayehiken, and the land, dry land, is revealed or seen. This is again a concept that it was all there and it was revealed. And this again takes us back to the very beginning of this concept of creation that we are looking at, that everything was created or was there, and it was gradually revealed, so that all of creation was in that first moment of creation, whether we call that Bereishit, that moment of Bereishit, or whether it is the first Vayomer. Everything was created at one moment, and day by day, that which was created was revealed. Now, there's 2 things I want to mention in that regard. The first of them is, this ties in with Big Bang theories in science, that everything existed in that first, I don't know, I can't even say atom, because it's much, much less than an atom, as we now know. You know, in Talmudic language, when they wanted to talk about the smallest amount they knew, they would speak about a mustard seed. But a mustard seed was slang for the smallest amount you can imagine, that pinprick. And in science now, the Big Bang theory actually does contain this idea that from that moment of creation, a start, everything was actually in it, and it's gradually unfolded and continues to unfold. There's nothing in the universe now that wasn't created at that first moment, and there's nothing that will be that wasn't created in the first moment. The first moment put into motion everything that will follow. So the idea that everything was already there and it needed to be released to grow and be unfolded. So that was the first thing I wanted to say in this regard. The second thing I wanted to say in this regard is, of course, in Jewish tradition, we have an idea that we know exactly where that first bit took place, and that's in the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem, that so many of us are so near to, that there was actually a physical point from which everything else grew outwards. So you've got time and space, and again, tying in with modern science and modern physics, that time and space are one, or connected as one, and this idea that they were created. And this is why it's appropriate in day 3 to say that it wasn't that God created the dry land, but revealed the dry land in day 3. Then we get to day 4, and sorry, I haven't mentioned yet, because we did mention it in another context, and we will continue to mention it in future contexts. That is the idea of what it means to be good, that God sees all the time that it's good. Not our topic today, but we'll come back to it. Day 4, the earth sent vegetation, seed-bearing plants, fruit trees. And this is going to be really interesting when we look at chapter 2, the second narration of creation, because it says the earth shall send forth, God says the earth shall send forth vegetation, seed-bearing plants. It happened, it says at the end of verse 11, Vayehichen, it happened, v'totzei haaretz deshe. If you look at the Hebrew, it still remains in the future, even though, because of, we know that the Vav can change future to past, but it is possible to read this, that what God does is he is announcing that the vegetation will continue to produce. And as we know, when it comes to vegetation, it's not a one-off thing. A seed produces another seed, produces another seed. There is a cycle of creation of seeds and vegetation. And it is possible to imagine, to just think of a single seed producing millions of trees over time. And so this idea that it's put into motion, but it doesn't all happen at once. The fourth day is particularly interesting for us because in the fourth day, God said there shall be lights in the sky to divide between the day and night. And they shall be as, Aria Kaplan's beautiful translation, they shall be as omens and define festivals, days, and years. They shall be light in the heavenly sky to shine on the earth. What's interesting in this narration is that the sun and the moon do not create night and day, but the sun and the moon are symbols of when it is night and day. This is the narration that we're getting here. And God made the two large lights, and they understand the sun and the moon, but he also made the stars. So there are lots and lots of sources of light, none of which is that first light that God creates on day one, but they are sources of light to us. So for human beings, or for later generations than those first 5 days, because on the sixth day humans are created, but until then, these other lights take on a role from day 4 onwards, that until day 4, there seems to have been night and day without the sun and the moon. And this is very challenging for us. What is it that there can be light, that there can be day and night without the sun and the moon? What does that even mean? And how do we use this theologically, and how do we have this sitting with our narrative of creation? So again, as I said, with regards to the first couple of verses, these are challenges to us, what we do with this information, with the narration of creation.
I have a question about time. You said in the first day, time is created because we have, and it's called the first day or day 1. Is day 4 then our time as opposed to a different way of measuring, that something we can understand? Or
I think this is one of the things that the theologians and the philosophers have grappled with enormously, because if it was only for human beings, maybe it could have even waited till the end of day 5 or the beginning of day 6, because we've got this whole day 5 coming up that has nothing to do with human beings. It's got to do with other swarming creatures. So it seems in a way that what God is doing, and this is, you're preempting where we're going to go with all of this, God is setting in motion a system that can operate without his intervention. And this is what seems to be emphasized on day 4. That God is now, until day 4, when God wanted a new day, or a new day and a new night, then he had to announce it and do it. But from day 4 onwards, it's in motion. It's happening. And I think that this is one of the things that I was trying to say with regards to all of what we're seeing here. Things are gradually being revealed, and also things are gradually being put into their state where they can sustain themselves. It ties in with the vegetation as well, that it can sustain itself without divine intervention all the way through. And this, of course, ties in with the relationship with the divine, that there is a sense throughout the creation story that we gradually release ourselves from the need for divine intervention for physical things to happen, and then of course for our moral decision making throughout Bereishit. We have to work out how to do this independently of God actually, saying do this or don't do this. We have to work out how to do it. So good and bad are also connected with this. this sense of God gradually setting things into motion which can sustain themselves, not just physically, but also morally. So that's my takeaway from all of that. But I know I didn't relate directly to the concept of time, but I think that it needed to be there already so that we could measure it later. So the fifth day is the team of swarming living creatures, flying creatures, God thus. Now we get a very interesting word in verse 21, which again I've pointed out to some of you in the past. Verse 21, Vayivra Elokim et hataninim. God created, but the word Vayivra, which was the word used at the very beginning, Bereishit bara, and we're going to see it again in relation to human beings only. They're the three occasions when this word, which is like creation ex nihilo, bara, creation out of nothing, that's the way we often interpret it, it appears, that word appears in three occasions: at the beginning, here, and in relation to human beings. And the question is, what does it mean here? And of course, some of the great Kabbalists have built a whole philosophy of the creation at this point of the parallel, what we might call it, the world to come, or spiritual world, or a world that's not part of our world, a parallel universe that exists and is created here. And we from time to time get glimpses into this spiritual world. And the sea creatures are seen as being part of that spiritual world, which God created at this point alongside our world. And in a way, it's a very beautiful idea that God was concerned that he and all of us might think that what was being created here in this creation was all that was, and that was all that concerned God. But it's not. The physical world is not all that is, and it's certainly not all that concerns God, and it shouldn't be all that concerns us. So the idea of inserting this word here to make us conscious of a parallel universe or another world, or even the possibility of multiple other worlds, that there is something beyond the physical world that we're talking about here. So I just wanted to mention that. I want to get to the sixth day, where it says again, the language continues the theme that I've been raising with you. And God said, Totsei haaretz nefesh chaya lemina. The earth is bringing forward the various species of livestock and animal life. And this ties in with what we've been saying about everything was created in that one moment. It wasn't that God had to create anew. The word vayivra doesn't have to be used here, because it already, the potential for these animals already exists. For those of us who want to see it that way, it lends itself nicely to theories of evolution, that one thing comes from the other. But I want to emphasize that we don't have to see it that way to understand the idea of everything having been created and gradually revealed. So this this idea of God said, let us that the earth is going to bring forth the species, is this idea that by day 6, the world is ready to receive these species. They're ready to come out, if you like. And it's at the end of day 6 that God creates the human being. Please note in verse 27, he creates him male and female. They are told to be fruitful and multiply, fill the land, and dominate the fish in the sea and the birds of the sky and every beast that walks the land. And of course, this idea of human domination, what that might mean and what that might imply, is a matter that's concerning us enormously. And you will find that twice it's rolled back. It's rolled back with regards to Adam and Eve, and it's rolled back again after Noah. So the idea of dominating, we misunderstood it perhaps and thought that it meant that we could do what we like. And God has to come back and say, no, that's not what I meant. I meant take responsibility. These we see the language and the instructions rolled back. And then we were told that we would have all plant vegetation should be food. So the Rav Kook and many others have taught that the ideal was that human beings would be vegan. And again, concessions were made in connection with our misunderstanding of domination. And these are things that we're going to deal with on another occasion, I think. And then the Christian version makes day 7 a separate chapter, but for the Jewish reading, this is still part of the first Aliyah. We get Shabbat, the heavens and the earth were completed, and that's what we sometimes use the word finished, but Aryeh Kaplan wants to say were thus completed. And with the 7th day, God finished all the work that he'd done. So he is reminding us of this idea that the creation of Shabbat is a form of creation too, but it's a different form of creation. And God blessed the 7th day. He declared it to be holy. And again, Avram Joshua Heschel and others reminding us that the first time the word holy is used is in relation to time, not in relation to place or person or activity, but in relation to time. And for us, holiness in time is the primary sort of holiness. And I'm reading you now Aryeh Kaplan's translation of verse 3. God blessed the 7th day, and he declared it to be holy, for it was on this day that God ceased from all the work that he had been creating, so that it would continue to function. And if we think about this idea that it was on the 7th day that God was able to look back and say, now everything's in place, it can continue to function. So that is our first creation narrative. And you will notice that the word that's been used, Bereishit bara Elokim, that is the name of God that we've heard so far. Then we get chapter 2, or the second reading, and I want to remind you that in chapter 2, the focus is on the second part of day 6. So we're not getting a new day. We're not getting day 8. We're going back and reviewing in more detail the second part of day 6. And it says, Ele todot hashamayim va'aretz, which God had created. This is the Chronicles, and all the wild shrubs did not yet exist, and all the wild plants had not yet sprouted, because God had not brought rain to the earth, and there was no man to work the ground. Now remember, we had already read that there were trees with their vegetation in day 3. But I pointed out to you then that it said, let the earth send forth its vegetation. So it is possible to imagine that in day 3, everything is still underneath the earth. That's one way of imagining it, not the only way. And I want to emphasize to you that because things are not, this is not a scientific book, it's not a historical book, it's not giving us all the details, it's not a science, so you are free to imagine what you might hear. But for me, it works out very beautifully to imagine that in day 3, all the seeds were planted, but God wanted to wait and have things sprouting when there was rain. So first he had to send forth rain. And what does it say? A mist rose up from the earth and it watered the entire surface of the ground. I've never really thought about this before. And, just every year you think about something differently. What we are reading there is the water cycle that we all learned about in primary school. The idea that the water rises from the earth and then it is caught in the clouds and it comes back down in rain. But there's something more profound here. What it's saying is we are not reliant on the waters from the shamayim, from the heavens above the sky, that we have all the resources, all the water we need is in this creation of earth, and God can raise it up to the clouds and it can come down as rain. It's there, it's all there. And this is the separation of the waters from the Shamayim, from the waters, Mayim, and the waters on earth. And we are seeing that here in the way that this narration comes. So the mist rises up. And then God formed man out of the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils a breath of life. Remember, we read about the creation of the human being, and we used the word Vayivra. It was brand new. And now we read how it's from the earth and God breathing his nostrils into it. What's new about it is, of course, the breath of God coming into it. But what we are reminded, of course, is we do have this very physical part to our being. We are connected to the earth. We are not purely spiritual like the angels. We are not, we can't separate ourselves from the act of creation, which reminds us of another thing, and that is, like all of creation, human existence is finite, because it is connected in that very physical sense. And God planted the ground, and again, the idea of the river. Verse 10, the river reminds us, I told you everything was connected with water, everything connected with water and rain, and a river reminding us that we like to see the water. We like to have evidence, and it's not just something we know exists. We like the power of rivers. I've been, reading novels like so many of you do, and the imagery of water in a good piece of literature. I don't think there's a good piece of literature which doesn't have some reference to waters and rivers and flowing water. Okay, God took man and he told man to work it. He took man in the Garden of Eden to work it, verse 15, to work it and watch it. This is where we start to get this concept of our responsibility to work it and watch it. Shomer, we are the keepers. And Shelley, we're not going to spend much time on the idea of being responsible for one another, that you and I, Hashomer Achi Anochi, that I'm the responsible for my fellow human being that we talked about before the class started. But here what we are seeing is we're responsible for the earth, and this idea of being responsible, of having to shomer, to watch. I'm just going to jump and show you what else we have in this chapter, in this Parsha, because we have the story of Adam and Eve eating from the tree of the Garden of Eden. We have the story of the first murder in chapter 4. And I'm preempting now next week, but there was a question asked, why did God create Cain and Abel if Cain was going to just murder and Abel, of course, was going to disappear? Why don't we just start from the third child, because we know they had many more. And the reason that Cain has to exist, might be because of one of her descendants, because she is the ancestor of Naamah, who is the wife of Noach, and therefore the earth's population also has to continue through the line of Cain. So I think that was an interesting answer, and we get that in the text. Then in chapter 5, we get, these are the chronicles of Adam, and we get now 8th generation, 9th generation, all the way through to the 10th generation, and continuing through this week, we get the story, we get to the 10th generation, which is Noach's generation, where God regrets creation. So we start off the creation story with God, if you like, a sense of excitement, God creating, and we finish Bereishit with God regretting that he has created. All this excitement for 10 generations, and at the end of the 10th generation, God said, I'm sorry I've done this, except for Noah. And of course, we try not to end a Parsha on a negative note. So the name Noach is mentioned at the end of this week's Parsha, so we don't finish just with God regretting. Now, I want to look at the handout that I sent. I hope all of you have got it. Can I just ask anyone to unmute themselves and tell me if you don't have it or if you can't see it, because I can share my screen if necessary, although I would prefer not to. Is everybody right? Everybody got it? Fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to read with you from the first article, which was on the Bar-Ilan website. You know, most of you, that I'm very fond of looking at that website for the Parsha. And it starts with a Midrash from Barashit Rabbah. And here is the Midrash. A certain philosopher asked Rabban Gamliel, saying to him, "Your God was indeed a great artist, but surely he found good materials which assisted him. What are they?" said he to him. "Tov, bow, darkness, water, wind, and the deep," replied he. "Woe to that man," he exclaimed. The term creation is used by scriptures, that's bara or v'yivra, in connection with all of them. Toh and bow, I made peace and create evil. I'm coming back to it. Water, praise him, ye heavens of earth and the waters that are above the heavens. For lo, he formed the mountains, created the wind, and Amos, the depth. There were no depths that I brought forth. What is the Midrash here trying to tell us? Well, I did put a bookmark all these passages from the Tanakh that are referred to in the Midrash, but I think you can see, even without me, I might just read you one of them from Isaiah, if I can find it quickly. Yes. In Isaiah, he says, "I am the Lord, there is none else. I form light and create darkness." We had seen that it seems that there was darkness on the earth. That's what the text told us. But in Isaiah, we read, and each of these quotations deals with another aspect, that God created darkness. So then I might ask you the question, well, if God created darkness, why does it say in the beginning there was darkness? Why doesn't the text tell us that? And that becomes a difficult question about the purpose of this narration of creation. Why we have this particular narration of creation, and why the Roman or the challenger, so a philosopher, when it's a philosopher in Talmudic language, it's usually referring to a Roman or somebody who is very influenced by Hellenistic culture. And the Hellenist or the non-Jew or the person influenced by this non-Jewish culture says, oh, he was a great artist, but he had all these materials at his beck and call. He had wind and water and the deep and the darkness. And so all he had to do was form things out of them. And that's what the Midrash seems to be saying, is that God was pretty good, but he didn't create everything. But looking back at my source, jump to the third paragraph, if we pay close attention to the sources that Rabbi Gamliel cited, we observe that they all use the present tense. So Rabbi Gamliel, if we read him again through 21st or 20th and 21st century eyes, we see something very interesting, that God was, according to Rabbi Gamliel, not just clever enough to have made all the sources that he was using. He made all his own resources, but he also is continually creating. God created ex nihilo, but God continues to create. And that is a fantastic theological position. What does it mean that God continues to create? Well, God, if everything was created by day 7, which is what we read in the text, we read in the text in day 7, God finished. He'd done all that he had to do. We see that he actually had put into place an earth, a universe that does continue to create. This text which I brought you, which I'm not going to read you in detail, tries to show how everything works beautifully in terms of momentum and conservation. I might just ask you to turn at the bottom of page 2, the bottom of page 2 of the handout. I'll read from the 3rd paragraph from the bottom of page 2. According to this law, don't worry, it's the law of symmetry. For any continuous symmetry in the world, there are corresponding quantities whose values are conserved over time. Without this assumption, the accepted laws of the physical world would collapse. In other words, what they're pointing out here is absolutely everything that we ever wanted and will ever want was created with that first, I don't know, word of God, that first break, that first whatever it was. And from now on, the world keeps creating, but it's creating on the basis of what was there, and it doesn't really grow, it just changes and takes another place. And this article deals with all of this, but I want to jump to the bottom of this, the last, on bottom of page 3, the last 2 paragraphs. The basic laws that anchor the physical world and give it the ability to continuing functioning, ostensibly forever, were created with an internal contradiction that demands constant change, and they themselves are constantly being created and evolving. Thus, a person who believes in the Creator can understand that the Creator has not ceased for a moment to create his world from the very foundations, e.g. from the level of the physical laws themselves of which the world is made, as expressed by Rabbi Gamliel. Thus, the declaration, "Let there be light," takes on the meaning of a command that is constantly being fulfilled and that becomes revealed to those who look at the world through the eyes of faith, inseparably combining Torah and creation. This article, which I'm not reading aloud with you because it requires a good, quiet, long read, but what it's saying is something that to me is very, very beautiful. And that beautiful idea is that the world constantly creates and recreates itself, and that the real light, and it ties in with Rachel's question, the real light is our ability to observe the constant creation. Real light is our ability to see beyond that the world runs its own course. There's a beautiful description by Nachmanides. What is it? He says, what is a miracle? He says, a miracle is that the world runs its own course. The miracle is that the sun rises in the morning, and that there is water and that there is rain, that all the things that we take for granted as natural are actually the miracle. And what this creation story is trying to teach us, according to this particular view, is that the world is constantly being created and recreated, and we should thank God for that. And because of what happened on day 1 with that first moment or first word. Just one moment, please. I want to mute my... I'm sorry, my husband's phone, he's gone up to dismantle our sukkah and left his phone down here making a very loud noise. So the idea of creation being an ongoing thing, and the idea that Rabbi Gamliel uses examples that all occur in the present tense to say Tov Vo is still there. Darkness is still there, because they're being renewed and used all the time. And sorry, he's not going to stop, and I don't know how to deal with my husband's phone. I'm sorry. If I knew how to, I would just do that, but I don't know how to. I could try. Okay, so that was the first reading that I wanted to bring you. Did anybody want to comment on this? I mean, all this we could talk about every idea for hours and hours, obviously, but does anybody want to say anything at this point?
I somehow it also goes with the nature of human beings being able to change, what we've been working on for always this long time, that there's a creation going on with, you mentioned evolution, or also with ourselves, our own thoughts and our own behaviors and so forth.
Yes, and being created in the image of God, which we skipped over too. And I just want to go back to the water aspect. The basis of all of this seems to be water, doesn't it? This is the basis of all of this. And we begin reading this as we begin, as Simon has noted, as we begin praying for rain. And Nathaniel has pointed out the clouds used symbolically also. When we talk about dark clouds, we don't only mean physical dark clouds. You know, we use this as a warning. So the morality is tied in with the physicality, and the physicality is tied in with the spirituality and the multiple universes and the partnership between. God tells us to take care of the earth, and we have to take care of the earth. The partnership between the human and the divine. Everything that we're going to talk about for the rest of the year, as in this first chapter, this first aliyah that we looked at, and it's not going to stop. I mean, it is endless. There's so much there. But I want to move on, and I want to read something about 3 stages of creation. I'm on page 4 of the handout, from an article by Jonathan Sachs, and this is to do with the 3 stages of the creation that he's using about good. So let's just read this together. In the first chapter of Bereishit, God creates man in his image after his likeness. We believe that God has no physical form, so being in his image must refer to some other likeness between humanity and God. The Torah tells us we have this potential to be like God in our actions, and we do that by imitating him. This could mean many things, but the primary role that we see God playing in the first chapter of Bereishit is as creator. Just as God is creative, so we should try to be creative. And there's 3 stages of creation. The first stage is saying, let there be. The second stage is there it was. And the third stage is seeing that it is good. And I think that this is something, again, we don't have time, and we won't read all of this article, but the idea that God says that something should happen, which is like our imagination. What we are supposed to do is we are supposed to be creative. We're supposed to imagine something, think of it, say it, speak out our thoughts, then bring it into physical reality. That's the second stage. And some people seem to think that that's adequate, that you think something and you bring it into second stage. But God said, analyzes it and says that it was good. We have to, once we've created something, we still have a responsibility for it on many, many levels, but it includes being constantly aware of the ethics or the morality of whatever we create and do. And again, this ties in physicality with something much greater than physicality. God gave us the ability to imagine, and God gave us the ability to create. God also gave us the ability to assess how what we created is being used, what it is doing to the world. And this is the third stage of creation, is taking that step. And it's not, again, if I tie in the previous thought, it's not a one-off. It's not that you did something and it's done. It's ongoing. And this is, I think, the key message that we can take from Jonathan Sacks here. I want to, in the last 5 minutes, look at the article by Gabi Barzilai, The Image of God in the Story of Creation, because I jumped over that, and to me, it's a very important distinction. Much has been written, and the difference, I'm on page 5, between the two accounts of creation, the one in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, to wit, the creator is referred to as Elohim in chapter 1 and Hashem Elohim in chapter 2. And in chapter 1, it begins in a universe of water, whereas in chapter 2, the universe is dry, no rain having fallen. The process of creation in chapter 1 is divided into 6 well-ordered days, whereas in chapter 2, there's no such division. The story of creation in chapter 1 has a conclusion, while the narrative in chapter 2 flows into the story of the Garden of Eden. In chapter 1, a man is the last thing created, compared to a king who comes to the table after it's been set. What that means, that's the Midrash, which says, why is human being created last? Because he's like a king coming to the table after everything is ready, whereas in chapter 2, he's created at the beginning of the narrative and sees the entire world being created before his eyes, and so on and so forth. So there's two different versions. Biblical scholars tried to say they're two different stories altogether. I'm on the top of page 6. Rabbi Mordechai Breuer drew a distinction between the natural world as described in chapter 1 and the revelatory world, in which God walks side by side, and man walks side by side with God, as described in chapter 2. Rabbi Soloveitchik was unique in that he talks about the two different figures of human beings. According to, I'm jumping to the next paragraph, according to Rabbi Soloveitchik's article in chapter 1, the Torah describes man as a creative being who asks, how is the world constructed? How does nature operate? Out of his desire to imitate nature, to improve and control it. In contrast, man is described in chapter 2 as a philosophical being who asks questions of cause and effect. Why? To what purpose? They're the questions. It's a beautiful article, Lonely Man of Faith. I suggest that you do read it at some point, but I'm jumping up to the end of the next paragraph. Rabbi Soloveitchik draws our attention to the Torah's special way of portraying the complexity of existence by breaking them down into two simpler components that can be understood by all sorts of people. Just as Rabbi Soloveitchik shed light on the figure of man, one of the main characters in the story of creation, I'll try to shed light on the other main character, God, the creator. So in chapter 1, God is the creator. He's omnipotent. He knows no existence. In chapter 2, God the creator is portrayed in a far more human manner. He does not create by fiat, that's by fashioning and forming. He plants and he causes things to grow. He works with his hands. The creator breathing the breath of life. It's a much gentler sort of creation and creator in chapter 2. And God makes Adam his partner. I'm at the last paragraph on page 6. Why does the Torah present two views of the creator of the universe which are so different from one another? The answer, it seems to me, the author Gabi Barzilai, lies in the weakness of each one. The God of chapter 1 is omnipotent, mighty, and remote. This portrayal stresses the greatness of God, but a person reading this description finds it very difficult to identify with such a God. Jumping to the next paragraph, the portrayal of God in chapter 2 is the diametric opposite. He cares for man and sees to his needs from the moment of creation. It's easy for humans to identify with such a God who resembles them in behavior, caring for all of man's want. It's easy to feel affinity for such a God, to pray to him and expect him to respond. However, this portrayal has a major weakness. A God who is so human is not essentially distinguished from other gods. And heaven forfend that the Torah present the one and only God as just another deity. And this is the message that we can learn from this Parsha, that God is both. We never can grasp all of God. We can never really relate to the God is so powerful and so remote that he can create ex nihilo. And we need to read about the second God, if you like, or the second aspect of God who's close to us. But we must, and in reading about the God who's close to us, the God who loves us, the God who breathes breath into us, we mustn't forget there also exists that greater God that is beyond us. And so just as we have, so I'll say it this way, the reason we have the two creation narratives is to teach us something about our special relationship with God. On the one hand, beyond us, remote from us, and on the other hand, close to us, like us, loving us and caring for us. And I think that's a very beautiful way of tying up what I want to say about this week's Parsha today. Any questions or comments before we just wish each other a good week?
Yesha koach. That was
So I want to wish everybody a good week. Some of you I will see tomorrow, where we're continuing to discuss how we might know God. Have a lovely day, everybody. A lovely week. Shavua tov.
Tודה רבה.